When we look at the human-environment interaction, we can see three important concerns in this context. Man is under control being on the Earth's surface. We have now, remember, we discussed the relationship between man and the environment. Interaction between man and environment. Man depend on the environment, or man adapt to the environment, or man modify the environment. Environmental friendly, sustainable, and modified issues. However, this interaction is very complicated one. We can't just say something about by looking at this interaction. The interaction may be negative effects, or the positive effects, or the neutral effects. Therefore, this relationship has been defined by different perspectives. This relationship has been defined by different perspectives. These three are also perspectives. The one perspective is man is a product of the nature. That is called environmental determinism. Man is a product of the nature. He cannot exceed, overlook the nature. Man cannot exceed the power of nature. Man should adapt to the environment. Man is only just a matter of the earth. He is not the whole. Man is not the whole power. He is just a matter, portion of the earth. That is called environmental determinism. So when we look at the history of geographical thought, we can see a lot of geographers and other scientists adopt this concept. What is the concept? Environmental determinism. The environmental determinism concerns man is under control being on the Earth's surface. He was one of the beings. He is not at all, not the whole thing. That is called environmental determinism. Environmental determinism. However, that is very important thing to know about the relationship between environmental and determinism. As I explained, these two relationships, man-environment relationship, explained from different perspectives. One is called environmental determinism. Another, some people look at this relation between environmental possibilism. Some people look at this relationship through environmental probabilism. Some people concern this relationship, define this relationship based on environmental probabilism, postmodernism, something like that. So this is the first one, environmental determinism. Actually, when we go fast, we could see, our early great philosophers bear this ideology, environmental deterministic ideology. Environmental ideology. For example, when we consider the Hippocrates, Strabo, Aristotle, these three persons, they very nicely explain how man depends on the nature. For example, climatic factor used by Hippocrates, Strabo, Plato, and Aristotle to explain why the Greeks were so much more developed in the early ages than societies in hotter and colder climates. They said definitely because of the climate. They said the ability and the powerful mind is a result of climate, moderate climate. Additionally, Aristotle came up with this climate classification system to explain why people were limited to settlement in certain areas of the globe. Very nicely, he said, people are not spread evenly on this earth's surface, Why? Because of the environment, climate. So have very nice things you can see. So in the past, we could see the philosophical background of this environmental determinism. So the philosophies of environmental determinism started from these great philosophers. Geography seeks to explain locational patterns and explore spatial associations along with possible cause and effect relationships. Periodically, through the more than 2,000 years history of the discipline, actually a misdirected fashion for precise and uncomplicated answers has resulted in a deterministic view of the complex relationship among physical and cultural geographic phenomena. Environmental determinism implies that people do not have freedom of decision making. That is very important one. They do not have freedom because they depend on the nature, natural environment, that their action and decisions are determined by some forces or influence other than human will. Actually, this ideology we could see with the great philosophers like Hippocrates, Strabo, Aristotle. Please find the contribution of these people to maintain, to keep the environmental deterministic ideology for centuries. So you have to write, you have to find the things, very important things. However, and also Al-Jais, a writer from East Africa, for instance, cited environmental factors as the origin of different skin colors. He said, why people are black, why white? Because of the environmental factor. He believed that the darker skin of many Africans and various birds, mammals, and insects was a direct result of the prevalence of black basalt rocks on the Arabian Peninsula, according to his ideology. That is very much related to the environmental determinism. Ibn Khaldun, one of the Arab sociologists and scholars, was officially known as one of the first environmental determinists. He lived from 1332 and 1406, during which time he wrote a complete world history and explained that the hot climate of sub-Saharan Africa caused dark human skin. That is very important. Ibn Khaldun, who lived 1332 to 1406, confirmed that there is a relationship between skin color and the climate. That is also a good evidence of deterministic ideology of Asian scholars. When we come to the modern geography, American geography is very important. It is evolved as an offshoot of geography, and so the first generation of American geographers was trained mainly as physical geographers. Their interest lay in the study of landforms, climate, and natural vegetation. Ultimately, they began to study the cultural geography, the distribution patterns of the human population, that is, leads to the environmental determinism. However, the central concept of environmental determinists were forcefully, if poetically, stated by geographer Ellen Simple in 1911. She wrote a book called The Influence of Geographic Environment that was fueled by the Charles Darwin's theory of origin of species in 1859. Environmental determinism rose to its most prominent stage in modern geography beginning in the late 19th century, when it was revived by the German geographer Friedrich Ratzel and became the central theory in the discipline. Ratzel's theory came about following Charles Darwin's Origin of Species in 1859 and was heavily influenced by evolutionary biology and the impact a person's environment has on their cultural evolution. Charles Darwin highlighted that the nature of the beings, species on the earth completely depend on the natural environment. And also we could find another environmental determinist, Friedrich Wilhelm Heinrich Alexander von Humboldt. We call Alexander Humboldt, Persian geographer, naturalist, and explorer, and the younger brother of the Persian minister at that time. He was the philosopher. So he also insisted that the environment is the key factor of humans. Charles Darwin's theory, based on the Charles Darwin's theory, Friedrich Ratzel very clearly explained the importance of environmental determinism. Friedrich Ratzel was a German geographer and ethnographer. He also used the first term, living space, in the sense that the national scientists later would use. Friedrich Ratzel mentioned that environmental determinism is a key term of geography. Humans should be depend on the physical environment. That is the thing he emphasized. Among geographers, Friedrich Ratzel have strongly emphasized the effect of environmental factors on the man's activity. Therefore, he is a very important person in this regard. Ratzel's Ratzelian concept of environmental discipline. As I said, he is a German geographer of 19th century and also was the founder of human geography. He stressed upon the influence of the physical environment on man, as he reckoned man as the end product of evolution. His first volume of anthropography was designed to seek the causes of human phenomena in the natural environment. His first book, called Anthropogeographic, how man interact with the environment. Actually, Ratzel's approach was influenced by the theory that the physical environment played an active role in the evolution of life on the Earth's surface. This was one of the basic ideas of, as I told, Darwin's theory. Under the impact of this approach, man began to be viewed somewhat like an organism that could be studied in the way that biologists attempt to study the organism in nature in relation to their physical environment. But Ratzel later modified his deterministic mode of thought in his second volume of Anthropogeography, 19th century, in which he discussed various human phenomena in terms of physical conditions and historical and cultural setting. So that is very, nicely presented ideology through his two books. However, Friedrich Ratzel was a popular environmental determinist in that part. His works very much promoted the environmental determinism, as we said. And we should exactly know the American geographer Ellen Churchill Semple. She was a disciple of Ratzel. She was actually a geographer. Actually, she was an American geographer. She wrote a book very famous, Influences of Geographic Environment, in 1911, and expounded the cause of environmental determinism vigorously. She starts her book with great conviction and asserts, what is that? Man is a product of the earth's surface. This means not merely that he is a child of the earth, dust of her crust, but that the earth has mothered him, fed him, set him tasks, directed his thoughts. She has entered into his bone and tissue, into his mind and soul. Simple, such deterministic statements were subjected to criticism and were termed as actually it is a naive with scientific evidence or something like that. But she is very strong in that. She was very strong in that ideology. Through her book, Ellen Semple identifies 4 key ways that the physical environment is affected in the context of environmental determinism. First, direct physical effects. She said climate, altitude, such factors directly affected to the human activities. And physical effects, culture, art, religion are physical effects in this context. Economic and social development, resources and livelihoods, and the movement of people, natural barriers and routes such as mountains and rivers. Those are altogether can be explained. Human beings are always controlled by the natural environment. That is the argument of Ellen Churchill Semple. Actually, parallelly, Ellsworth Huntington also well supported this concept. He was a professor of geography at Yale University during the early 20th century. Particularly, he was well famous with his view of climatic determinism, economic growth and economic geography. He served as president of the Ecological Society of America in 1917 and also the Association of American Geographers in 1923. He was very tough with the confirmation of man-environment relationship from the view of determinism. He was a prominent key to confirm that environmental deterministic ideas. And we could see that Thomas Griffith Taylor also as an English geographer and anthropologist, supported the idea of Ellen Simples and others that man is controlled by the earth's surface. The human activities most of the time depends on the environmental practice, particularly the climate. So after that, later on in the late 20th century, we can see there are some other geographers also confirm that environmental determinism idea in different ways. The late 20th century saw a revival in environmental determinism as a branch of the new, broader study of environmental history. This has been helped by the quantitative revolution in geography and demography by authors such as Browdell and several popular accounts such as the works of Gerard Dane and Jeffrey Herbst and the Ian Morris. So those are the people who promoted environmental determinism in other ways as well. By considering all these facts, we could see that there are so many evidences of environmental determinism. The one important factor is climatic influence. When we consider the human population and settlements, no large cities in the Antarctica because it is too cold. Since most of the sunlight is reflected off there due to the tilt of the Earth's axis and the angle of incoming solar radiation. Hence, most human settlements are between the Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn. That is one example how climatic factor influence to the human population and the environment. When you see the population distribution world map, you can identify. And also the water, when we consider as the natural source, human settlements have mostly been around 1% of the world's fresh water. Most cities are built around the major rivers. Most early civilizations were all around major water bodies. For example, Mesopotamia, located in between Tigris and Euphrates and Tigris River, and Nile River, Egypt. And agriculture is very important. Environment tends to heavily influence what kind of agriculture a culture practices. Human culture shaped by environment. For example, buildings, clothing, jewelry. When you come to the cold regions, you could see how people build their roof of houses with large angles. So mountainous people are simple, backward and conservative because they live actually secluded from others. And the livelihood of human beings, particular economic activity like trade, employment, agriculture, culture, civilization, resource, anatomy, behavior, political and knowledge or intellect, health and region are based on the physical factors. The human livelihood mainly depend on the natural environment and health as well. So not only that, politics and civilization basically, for example, Aristotle considered the people of the middle latitude to be endowed with the finest attitude and thus destined to rule over others. So many things we can consider. There are so many objections as well against to the determinism. In contrast, the other wing of geographers and other scientists have had an objection on determinists and try to show their position by forwarding the ideas of environmental possibilism in spite of their profound interest. That is the second lesson we are going to start. Before that, I will suggest you to read these two articles particularly, even though they were written long ago. Those are very important to understand the nature and culture of environmental determinism ideology. The first one, written by Lethwaite in 1966, Environmentalism and Determinism, a search for clarification, published in a very popular journal, Annals of Association of American Geographers. And the second one, The Social Origins of Environmental Determinism, written by Richard Peed in 1985, The Social Origin of Environmental Determinism, published in same journal. So please refer these articles and improve your knowledge on environmental determinism.